In the lead-up to the annual Transport Heritage Expo at Central Station in Sydney, 3265 from the Powerhouse Museum and 3526 from Transport Heritage New South Wales are seen at Allawa before pulling into Hurstville during their transfer run to Sydney from Felmere. The two locos are awaiting the all clear to Hurstville, where from there they'll make their way to the former Everleigh Railway workshops, where they'll be stable during the 3-day long weekend. The two locos will now head for Hurstville. "3526 now leaves the train to Everleigh, tender first. Day 1 of the 2024 Expo began on Saturday, October 5th, with 3526 pulling the first shuttle trip to Hurstville with 4201 at the back assisting. Here we see the train passing us at Carlton. "4201 now leaves the train back to Sydney. Before we see 3265, a Countrylink XPT can be seen making its way to Hurstville from Kogarah, led by XP 2004 City of Kempsey. This is a rare sight, as these trains aren't as common to see on the Illawarra line. This is due to the northbound entrance of the XPT Maintenance Centre near Sydenham being closed due to the metro conversion to Bankstown. The XP power cars are named after cities and towns that the XPT served. And here is the same set now heading towards Sydenham, with XP 2004 now trailing. Next we see 3265 now heading for Hurstville with its first shuttle train for the day, with 4501 assisting. 4501 now leads the train to Sydney. Next is Arncliffe, as 3526 is seen approaching with its second shuttle trip to Hurstville. After that, we see 4 82 class Pacific National diesels passing through with a grain train heading towards the Illawarra south coast. (4201) now leads the second train back to Sydney. The train stopped outside of Woolley Creek Station, as 3265 is now seen passing through heading to Hurstville with its second train for the day. 4501 once again leads the train to Sydney. At Alabar we see another XPT set passing through, this time Unit XP 2011 City of Sydney, as it heads for Hurstville with XP 2007 City of Albury. XP 2007 now leads the way to Sydenham. Next up is 3265 with its third shuttle train for the day. Once again, 4501 leads the train to Sydney. To conclude the Saturday event, we move to Tempe, and before we see the two locos on their last shuttle trips, an A380 Airbus from Qantas is seen landing itself to Sydney Airport in Mascot in Sydney's inner south. The A380's maiden flight started in Toulouse, France in April 2005, and entered commercial service with Singapore Airlines in 2007. Qantas first flew the A380 in October 2008 from Sydney to Los Angeles. Qantas's remaining 10 members of its A380 fleet will retire starting from the 2032 financial year. Meanwhile, as passengers disembark from their flight, 3526 is now seen passing through with its last train for the day to Hurstville. While a Tangara train makes its way towards Sydney. The overhead steel bridge seen surrounding the heritage-listed station was built in 1918 and is still standing strong over 100 years later, despite some surface rust. We now move to the stairs that leads to the Griffith Road exit to see 4201 leaving the train to Sydney, while 3265 passes by with its last train for the day to Hurstville. To end the Saturday event, 4501 is now leading the train to Sydney as it passes Walleye Creek Station. Walleye Creek is the junction for passengers who wish to travel on the Illawarra or the airport line. Next day, Sunday, October 6, we'll be heading our way to Central to see the hype of activity at this year's expo. To start the day, we took the self-operated metro train, as it's seen pulling into Sydenham ready for its journey to Tallawong in the northwest Greater Sydney area. The line had been extended to Sydenham from Chatswood, which was opened back in August 2024. The Chatswood to Tallawong line was opened in 2019. It will continue its extension to Bankstown, which is now closed for trains for the line's metro conversion up until late 2025. Transport Heritage in New South Wales had ran some last heritage trains on the line in September 2024 using 3265 and Red Rattler F1, which will be covered in our upcoming summer edition in December. The first stop from Sydenham is Waterloo Station, which takes about 3 minutes. Next is our stop, Central, which takes about 1 minute from Waterloo.
Intercity and regional trains, buses and light rail services. Doors will open on the right. This stop is Central.
We now move to the country platforms at Central where the expo takes place and see some of the displays which we will see later on in the video. This year we hop on board CPH Railmotor 1, 3 and 7 from the Patterson Railmotor Society, who will take us on the Botany freight line, where we'll run alongside the Sydney airport. All trips on the Railmotor that ran for 3 days were sold out, as it is a rarity to rail fans and passengers, as the line is normally used for freight to access Port Botany. Before we depart, 4201 is seen pulling its train into Sydney after one of its shuttle trips to Hurstville with 3526.
Customers travelling to Armadale Moree, your 933 Armadale Moree service, now outside platform 4. Please make your way to platform number 4 for the 933 Armadale Moree service. Thank you.
The time has come now to traverse our way to Botany. This is the former Everleigh Carriage Workshops, which was built in 1888 and was in operation for the repairs and maintenance for suburban and long-distance carriages, with an upgrade in 1986 to refurbish single-deck carriages, and was one of the first locations during the Great Strike of 1917 over the introduction of a card system to record what each employee was doing and how fast the job was completed. It is regarded as one of Australia's largest industrial conflicts. The carriage work ceased operation in September 1989 and was used to store redundant carriages and asbestos removal for locomotives and carriages. Since 2007, the site's western end has been redeveloped as the Carriage Works Theatre. Next we pass Flemington in Sydney's inner west. The massive building beside the line is the Sydney Markets, which is primarily a distribution hub of fresh produce, flowers and other food products for Sydney, with a wholesale section for larger businesses and the general public. It is the central marketplace for Sydney's farmers to sell their products, with history dating back to 1788. Next we see the Flemington Maintenance Depot, and the largest one for Sydney trains, which was opened in 1927. It features 20 storage roads, 10 of which are under the main shed, a lift shop, as well as a wheel lathe. This building here is also a train washing facility. As we wait clearance to cross the Sefton Triangle at Regent's Park, to cross to the freight line that traverses towards Bankstown, we take a look at some of the interior of CPH Railmotor No. 1. With clearance given, we now make our way towards Bankstown to cross over the Sydenham station towards Botany. But first, we cross the freight line near Rookwood in Western Sydney. Nearby are the New South Wales Trainlink D sets, also known as the Marion fleet, awaiting to enter public service. The first set was delivered from its manufacturer, Hyundai Rotem in Changwon, South Korea in December 2019. But after a protracted dispute between the New South Wales state government and the Rail, Tram and Bus Union over safety concerns, they are scheduled for service in late 2024. These trains will replace the V and H sets, the latter of which will be transferred to City Trains, and the D sets will operate on the Blue Mountains, Central Coast of Newcastle and South Coast lines. Next, we make our way through Enfield, where it's home to the Enfield Intermodal Logistics Centre, a large rail-to-road container hub where the former Enfield Locomotive Depot once stood, and, from 1969 to 1975, where the New South Wales Rail Transport Museum, now New South Wales Rail Museum, was once based. A container yard was considered to be built by the then Public Transport Commission since 1973 on the site of the museum, which forced them out to its now current site at Thelmere in 1975. However, the PTC's idea of the yard was never built.
They're going to run on the intercity lines, I think.
We now cross to the Bankstown Freight Line and see the conversion of the passenger line as part of the Sydney Metro system. We now pass Marrickville Station, the second last station of the Bankstown Metro conversion, as we are nearing Sydenham. A passenger plane can be seen flying above us as we pass Fraser Park, which indicates to us that we are drawing near the airport and our destination, Port Botany. here is the Sydney Airport at Mascot, and is not just the busiest airport in Australia, but in the Oceania as well. It is the primary hub for Qantas, as well as the secondary hub for Virgin Australia and Jetstar, and a focus city for Rex Airlines. It is situated next to Botany Bay on 907 hectares, 2,241 acres of land with 6 runways, with it being one of the world's longest operated commercial airports, as it was opened on January 9, 1920. Between 2016 to 2017, the airport handled about 42.6 million passengers and 348,904 aircraft movements. It was ranked as the 48th busiest airport in 2022 and serves 46 domestic and 43 international destinations to Sydney directly. It was rated as one of the top 5 worldwide airports in 2018 for handling 40 to 50 million passengers annually, and was overall voted the 20th best airport in the world at the Skytrack World Airport Awards. A second Sydney airport is expected to be opened in Western Sydney in 2026. Nearby is the Qantas hangar, Australia's flagship airline. It was established in 1922 as Queensland and Northern Territory Aerial Services at Winton in Queensland. Its headquarters was established in Sydney in 1975. The name Qantas is the abbreviation of its name mentioned earlier. It's the largest airline by fleet size, international flights and destinations in Australia and the Oceania, and is a founding member of the One World Airline Alliance in 1999. It is also the only airline in the world that flies to 7 continents, such as Africa, Antarctica, Asia, Europe, North and South America from its hubs in Sydney, Perth, Melbourne and Brisbane, and flies to over 60 domestic destinations in Australia. We pass the airport as we approach Port Botany. Ampol Banks Motor Oil Terminal is our stopping point, and now number 7 will take us back to Sydney. As we pass over Tillman Park in Sydenham, we briefly see work going on for the metro line extension on the Bankstown line, with one rail vehicle blocking the northern entrance of the XBT service centre, hence them heading towards Hurstville as seen earlier in the video. We're now back on the main suburban line at Lidcombe. The A set seen here is on platform 0, for those wishing to travel to Sydney Olympic Park. We once again pass Flemington Maintenance Depot. And once again, Sydney markets. We'd outpaced a Waratah B set at Strathfield. Past the office complex at Burwood with the reflection of the rail motors, ideal for photographers who travel on heritage trains. We return to Central and see 3526 passing us as it heads for Hurstville on its third shuttle trip. Then after we disembark, 4501 is seen pulling in with 3265 from its second Hurstville bound shuttle. The 32 will now leave Central bound for Hurstville with its third load of passengers for the day. After the 32 had gone, Red Rattler F1 pulls in after a trip to Rhodes in Sydney's inner west. Originally, the W3 set that was standing opposite from 3265 on platform 3 was to do this run, but due to additional testing and work required for its accreditation, F1 was its replacement. With fresh passengers, F1 now heads off on its last run to Rhodes for the day. Later on, 4201 now leads into Central with 3526, and will now get ready for its last shuttle trip for the day. As passengers board 3526, the rail motors are now once again heading for the Botany goods line. This will be their last one for the day.
Riding bicycles, skateboards, scooters or skates on the concourse or platforms is not permitted.
Meanwhile, a helicopter can be seen hovering around the station. With passengers on board and 3526 given clearance, it's off to Hurstville once again. With the City Trains electric waiting, 4501 is now seen leading 3265 into the station. As the 32 simmers waiting for its last run for the day, F1 now pulls in from Rhodes. Now 3265 pulls away for Hurstville. We now take a look at the displays around Sydney Central. Here is 42105, seen in our 2023 coverage of the Expo, on display from Chumrail with 2 carriages open for display from East Coast Heritage Rail, formerly 3801 Limited. Also on display is an NR class diesel from Pacific National. NR67 was built in 1996 by A. Goningen & Co. at their Basildon hub in Western Australia, and is still in operation today along with its other classmates on interstate container and steel trains, as well as the famous luxury passenger trains the GAN and the Indian Pacific. A single NR class diesel is capable of hauling 1,300 tons from Melbourne to Brisbane without refueling. Like every other Transport Heritage Expo event, some carriages from the Civil Aurora set are on display, offering booked patrons a high tea dining experience. 4916 is the loco at front. S28, also preserved by historic electric traction, is seen in the station after taking passengers to Lavender Bay in the lower north shore of Sydney, near the famous Sydney Harbour Bridge. The last time we saw S28 was back in July 2019 with S56 on the Farewell F-Set tour at Sydney Central Station, which can be found in our August 2019 video. This shot of the S-Set almost looks like something out from Thomas the Tank Engine.
Smoking is not allowed at this station or on trains. Fines apply. Thank you.
621 and 721 from the Patterson Railmotor Society are also seen on display too. Next up is the W3 set from Historic Electric Traction. This was the first set to use double-deck carriages, and the first set to feature power-operated safety doors. The carriage we entered is T4814 in its Public Transport Commission livery, which was built by Tulloch Limited at Rhodes in 1964, and retired from railway service in 1993. T4801 in Tuscan Red was also built by Tulloch Limited at Rhodes in 1964 and also retired in 1993. This was the very first double-deck carriage to enter service, and the double-deck carriage stock were innovative for their time, as they were constructed with lightweight aluminium construction with steel underframes with air-ride bogies for better riding qualities. The two single-deck carriages were built by Commonwealth Engineering near Granville in 1958. C3702 entered service in December 1957. The single decks were also nicknamed Sputnik, out of the first artificial Earth satellite being launched into the elliptical Earth orbit by the former Soviet Union 2 months prior. It too retired in 1993. After our tour of W3, S28 now pulls out of the station ready to be stored at the Flemington Maintenance Depot for the night to be prepared for its last 2 trips for the last day of the expo on Monday. Outside the station are some vintage buses from the City Bus Museum. On display is AEC Regent 3 2878, which entered service in 1954 and retired in 1979, and then purchased by a member of the museum. It was then sold to fellow member Chris O'Brien in the late 1980s, and returned to service in 1995. Originally, this tow truck was a half-cab bus in Melbourne, Victoria until 1956. And was then sold to the Metropolitan Transport Trust Perth in 1974, and was heavily converted into what you're seeing right now. It was withdrawn from service in 1986, and was then sold to the museum in Sydney. Prior to any special event, it usually surveys the route in preparation for the vintage bus fleet. And here we are reunited with 1923, who took us to the Chullora Heritage Hub Tank Annex back in May 2024. To know more history of this bus, you can find it in our Autumn 2024 edition. The vintage buses were free and would take passengers for a 20-minute round trip of Sydney CBD or as a connecting service for Elizabeth MacArthur Platoon, and Parama Park Wharf and Sydney Harbour for the steam tug Waratah and Edwardian steam launch Lady Houghton. On this day were some buses from London. This one, RML 2353, also known as Scarlet, is operated by Red London Bus and was built in November 1965. She worked at Godstone Garage in Surrey in 1972 and moved to Windsor Garage near Windsor Castle until she was transferred to Harlow Garage in Essex in 1977. She was transferred to other depots over the years until her final depot at Shepherd's Bush in West London in 2004. She was then exported to Australia in 2006, working on the Gold Coast in Queensland until 2012, when she moved to Sydney. The double-decker bus is often hired out for weddings, birthday parties and corporate events, as well as used for promotional purposes. You can find their website in the description. This one, RT3708, is owned by the Sydney Bus Museum. It entered service at Enfield Garage in 1953, until it was withdrawn from service at Southall Garage in 1977. It was then sold to Barkel in Australia in 1984, and was then bought by the museum in 1989, and was overhauled in 1995. As RT3708 passengers disembark, we see the famous clock tower, once again offering tours sold out during the 3-day expo. Scarlet, RML 2353, now leaves to pick up more passengers for its next round trip, while RT3708 awaits its call to pick up its next lot of passengers. We now conclude Sunday with RT3708 leaving now to pick up its passengers. Monday, October 7th is the last day of the expo, and at Banksia, we see 3526 passing through bound for Hurstville on its first shuttle trip. While we wait for 3526, we see another XPT set rolling through, which were XP 2009 City of Canberra leading with XP 2005 City of Newcastle as they head for Hurstville to switch on to the down line to enter the south end of the XPT service centre in Sydenham. (4201) now leads the train from Hurstville to Sydney. As the two Heritage locos head for Sydney, Mechanised Track Patrol Vehicle, MTBV2, is seen inspecting the track to make sure nothing is broken or defected using laser-based technologies for track geometry, rail profile, rail corrugations, and non-contact overhead wiring measurements. MTBV2, along with MTBV1, are based at Granville in Western Sydney. As we wait for 3265, we see a quadruple-header grain train, as the XPT set we saw earlier makes its way to Sydenham, this time XP 2005 City of Newcastle leading. If any British viewers are watching this, you might have noticed that the XPT looks very similar to the British Rail Class 43s used for the Intercity 125 services. The design of the XPT was done in cooperation with British Rail with Commonwealth Engineering. However, the power units were made shorter, and the engine, the Paxman Valentina, that was also used for the Class 43s, was downrated and the gearing lowered for a top operating speed of 160 km an hour, 100 miles per hour. The passenger carriages were based on a Budd design, and the suspension was modified to operate on less stable track with the cooling system and air filters adapted for the hot, dustier Australian weather. (3265) is now seen passing through. We move to Rockdale as 4501 rolls through on the return journey to Sydney. At Carlton, 3526 is now seen on its second shuttle. (4201) once again leads the train back to Sydney. At Cogra, 3265 is seen flooring through the station on its second shuttle trip. We now move to Campbelltown on the main southern line, as 3265 and 3526 with 4201 at the rear make their way back to the New South Wales Rail Museum at Thelmere, ending another year of the Expo. A credit to Transport Heritage New South Wales for organising this annual event, and we are already looking forward to 2025.